And welcome back. So you can see we got our cylinder head just kind of propped up here, just on a block of wood to hold it level. We got you in a tripod to help steady things up, and went out and got from Amazon this generic kit of easy outs, or should say generic set of easy outs. And what we need to do is see if we can get this bolt out of here. Now I think the kit called this a number 5 easy out. I'm sorry, number 4 extractor. And I'm going to use a small bit and see if we can get away with this. This is 7/64 bit, which is about the same size as this bit on that extractor. Then we're going to use a center punch to give us a nice starting bit into the center of that bolt. See if we can get it drilled down far enough to get this extractor in there. Now, from what I understand, since these bolts are steel and this cylinder head is obviously aluminum, then typically when I've seen this done is that normally the bolts don't corrode too terribly bad because it being a steel bolt inside of an aluminum head. The ones I've seen where this has been extracted, usually they extract out pretty smooth, but you know, we'll find out. So I'm going to get things situated here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to drill this first, and then I'll bring you back, because obviously, you know, no sense in you watching me drill this. It'd be pretty boring. But I will center punch that first. And in case you're wondering, I'm going to try this for the first time. But that's the center punch that I'm using. And I'll put a link in the description to Amazon where I pick this up, as well as that easy out kit. So without further ado, I'm going to center punch this and commence the drilling, and I'll bring you back and let you know how it goes. Talk to you in a bit. And welcome back. I got you zoomed in down here a little bit, and you can see that we've got our starter hole drilled. Now, I started with a 7/64, as I told you, and then just kind of test fit our extractor bit in there, and it was a little bit too small, so I stepped it up to an 1/8 inch bit for what this kit calls a number 4 extractor. And it just seems to kind of start to bite. Seems to be just big enough to kind of start to bite in there as you turn it. So I'm going to try it with that size hole first. And let's see. Let me get, I shouldn't need to tap it in. And also wanted to mention, I did cheat a little bit. This is the brand new set of Milwaukee titanium bits. So they're nice and sharp. I mean, it drilled into the top of that, what's left of that bolt, you know, pretty much no time flat. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm just putting the extractor in, and I'm just going the direction you would normally take to loosen a bolt out. And the way that extractor's threaded, it's going to start to thread down into that little pilot hole that we drilled, and hopefully eventually it'll bite enough where it'll start to turn that bolt out. Maybe. Oh, I think I see the bolt turning. Yep, bolt is turning, or what's left of that bolt. There we go. Yes, I found it easier just to stick it in a socket and a ratchet. Nice. Okay. In case you're wondering, that extractor fit into a 1/4 inch socket on a 1/4 inch ratchet. And there we go. That's what's left of our bolt. Beautiful. So we got that out of there, which is nice. And you can see, probably have to, yeah, I'm going to have to grab that with a pair of pliers or something to spin that extractor backwards. But hopefully you can see that there. That's where we drilled our pilot hole, and it bit in enough. And again, in this kit, they called it a number 4 extractor, and I drilled an 1/8 inch pilot hole into what was left of that bolt to get it out. But that, you know, it holds true. That's what I saw online. The nice thing about it being an aluminum head is that, as you saw, there's very little to no corrosion on those threads. So, you know, we got lucky in the sense that it drastically helped getting that bolt out. Because if this was a steel head and a steel bolt, then chances are we'd be fighting corrosion trying to back that out as well. But awesome. Okay, that piece is out. So what I'm going to do is very carefully clean up all these metal shavings from when we drilled that pilot hole into that bolt. And I will more than likely let this cylinder head just kind of dry overnight. This is right after we cleaned it, if you remember. And we still have relatively high humidity because it was kind of raining outside. And again, with the amount of brake clean we used to clean this cylinder head, it kind of rapidly cooled it and just caused it to condense. So I'd like for it to dry a little bit before we get in there and start lapping our valves. But I'm going to work on getting these metal shavings cleaned up. And then once we start getting ready to lap valves, I'll bring you back. But again, I'll put links in the description to the center punch, the spring-loaded center punch that we're using, as well as the extractor kit. Like I said, it's a generic kit, but at least in this case, it did get the job done. But I'll bring you back. Thank you much. Bye. And welcome back. So in our last video, we showed you a little bit about how we're kind of cleaning the cylinder head down. And you can see we've got the driver's side cylinder head here. So the cylinder you're looking at, if from front to rear, this would be 1, 3, 5, and 7. So this is our number 7 cylinder. And if you remember, this is the cylinder that had the bent intake valve in it that we had to persuade in order to get removed. And again, just to kind of recap on it, just like when you saw us do the passenger one, you've got a little pitting here just due to electrolysis over the years. So it's not going to be 100% spotless, but as you can see, it's a far cry better than what it was when we started. So what I'm going to do is lap these valves in since they're new. Not since they're new, I'm doing it for a reason. One, since they're new, and two, this valve seat you see here, the valve is going to see this valve seating area you see here, nice and shiny, and you can kind of see the valve seat a little bit here in the camera. What I want to do is put a little bit of lapping compound and kind of work that back and forth a little bit, just to kind of eliminate and help clean this valve seat up. I also want to basically start these two mating together, since they've never been together before. You know, if you were just doing this and not replacing your valves and you're just putting your valves back in, yeah, you could probably put them back in and not have to bother it, because the valve and the seating ring, you know, have been together since, you know, they were formed. I did it on the 6.4. I lightly lapped all my valves just to make sure that they were cleaned up and nice and sealing, just as kind of a measure that we'll, you know, went ahead and did it while we were in there type deal. And what I'm using is what you see here. It's just a pre-mix. I actually got to mix it up a little bit because you can kind of see the oil separating out of the compound. So it's basically just a gritty grinding compound, as you see there. I'm put a little bit on the, just using an acid brush, and I'm going to put a little bit on the edge of where that seating surface is in that valve, and use our tool and just do a little bit of manual lapping. Again, just want to make sure those seating surfaces start to wear into each other. Now, once we get all that done and get everything cleaned back up and get make sure that we get all of that valve wrapping compound out, because it is a grinding compound. You don't want this stuff left, you know, around moving parts of the engine. Once we get it all cleaned up and we get our new valve springs in, which again, these are the springs we're going to use. If you remember, they came out of our 6.4 truck when we did the upgrade to it. So we'll get those seats in, those springs. Once we get everything reassembled, then I'll tilt the head in upside down like you see it here, level it out, and then just take some rubbing alcohol and pour it into each of the combustion areas with the spark plugs installed, and we shouldn't see a leak. If we see a leak either on exhaust or intake, then we know that either something's wrong with the mating surface of that valve seat, or maybe we got to come in here and lap it a bit more to kind of get things to close correctly. So I'm gonna, let me get a little block of wood here to help stabilize that. Again, random pieces of cut 2x4 that you hold on to from other projects come in useful for stuff like this, because now I can kind of put that underneath there and I can bear down on the front of this, and it's not going to continue to weeble wobble back and forth. So I'm going to start working on this. I'm going to get set up to do the first one. I'll bring you back and kind of show you what I'm doing. I'm not going to show the entire process for the whole cylinder head because it would just get boring and repetitive, but I'll show you what I'm doing on this first intake and exhaust one on this number 7, and then we'll do both the heads at that point, and then I'll bring you back when we put the valve springs in, and I'll catch you in a bit. Bye. So I've got you back here. Just want to show you kind of how I'm prepping this. I still have the valve stem seals deinstalled from the cylinder head, because again, it helps with this process if the valve stem seal isn't there, and if you're going to be changing valve stem seals and you're going to do this process, I suggest just leaving those seals out for now, because those seals, are meant to seal the valve stem as it goes, up and down into the cylinder, and if you're going to be twisting this thing side to side like we are, it may not be good for its long-term wear. So again, it's just easier if the valve stem seals aren't there. But again, just for protective measures, I'm gonna put a little bit of oil. And this is the same. This is just this is the same weight oil that the truck uses. I think this is an OW20. I forget. Oh well. Doesn't really matter what weight oil you're using on this piece. We're just getting a little bit of lubrication onto this. I'm just going to take a little bit of this lapping compound, and again, I am not an expert on this, and I am not an engineer, so I'm just showing you what I'm doing. I'm not even putting a lot on here. I'm sure some people are probably cringing about me doing this, and that's fine. Feel free to put it in the description and state your case as to why you would or would not also do this. Again, not going too terribly heavy with it, just a little bit. I'm just going to take the bigger suction tool. Let's go ahead and drop this down in there first. A little side to side motion. Pick it up every now and then, tap it. You can hear that grit, and that's the most problematic part I found of doing this, is getting this suction cup to stay stuck to those valves. So what I want to do now is take this out using plenty of clean shop towels when doing this. And just wipe that seating surface off. And what I'm looking for is a consistent gray ring to kind of go around that entire valve seat. That's kind of what I see here. See, can I zoom you in? I may have to stop the recording and zoom you in. Let me do that. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to zoom you in so you can see this a bit better. And welcome back. So I got the tripod dropped down. I got the camera's GoPro zoomed in as far as I can. And I don't know if you can see that there, but you can see a nice consistent gray ring going all the way around. And it might be, let me see if I can pick you up to get you to see this. Let me go get I'm going to leave you, not the world's best camera work. Let me go get a shop light for you. Okay, yeah, that looks good. Okay, let me show you what I'm looking at here. Okay. Get some better light on that. There we go. And you should be able to see that ring now kind of go completely around. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for to make sure that we've got a nice, good, consistent, what appears to be contact patch going around there. Let's get you reset here. And I'm going to bring the valve in now. Stop blinding you with a shop light first. Just going to wipe the grinding compound off of our valve here. There we go. And on the valve, hopefully you can also see this. You can see that the valve itself I'd expect to be okay, because again they are factory new. But you can see a consistent gray line now around that valve. And that's all I'm looking to do. I'm not looking to go crazy with this, again, because it just helps to confirm that our seat's okay. It helps to confirm that we've gotten the debris and the rest of the junk that may have accumulated on this seat out of the way. And then as these are done or paired together, then I'll get them dropped in and just in place to hold them. And we've already got another box. It's kind of hard for you to see this because I've got you zoomed in still, but you can see that we've got another box ready to go, so we can keep track of, once we do the lapping, which valve goes back into the correct cylinder and location. So when we get ready to reassemble this cylinder and put our springs in, we're not taking something that we lapped for 7 and inadvertently putting it on 6. So that being said, I'm gonna let you go. And actually, let me do one more thing. So I've got you zoomed in here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the intake. Let's do an intake. I know, potentially the world's worst video. Do the same thing on this one, just to show this to you. You'll notice on that one you've got this nice big angular surface that I'm putting the lapping compound on, but you'll notice you don't see anything gray. You don't see that gray ring like we saw when we did the intake. So when we're done with this, we should see that same persistent gray ring now go around this entire valve. Again, I'm not going really heavy on the compound because again, I'm not looking to lap these things, through the core of the earth. Before we forget, let's get our oil on our valve stem. again. We've got the seals out, but I prefer to do it because it still has the ride inside this sleeve, like so. We may be able to use the small suction cup on this one. Yeah. It's not going to be any different. I'm gonna, well, let me see if I can not block your view. There we go. You can kind of hear that grinding sound, and you can kind of hear it lighten up at some point. And usually when it lightens up, I just pick it up, I tap it to get the material forced back down. Just using the palm of my hands, doing the old side to side and tap method. Again, I am not an expert in this at all. There's engine builders out there and hot rod builders out there that have been doing this far longer than I've been alive. Okay, with that bun done, and again, that's all I'm doing, fairly light. I just want to take it back out. We'll do the same process. We're going to clean up, get our compound out of here. And if you never used wrapping compound before, especially the premix stuff, if you're wondering why you keep smelling gear oil, you'd be correct. Because it looks like it's, my understanding, this is just basically a mixture of dirt, not dirt, but grit and grease. Smells just like almost like a heavy duty, like manual transmission grease or differential grease is what it reminds me of, or moly grease if you ever dealt with a tub of moly grease. Okay, so hopefully you can see that a lot better on this one. You can now see on this valve here that we have a nice grayish consistent line going all the way down through this valve, whereas before it was just a nice, you know, highly shined surface. But that is where you can see that valve seat is going to set on this particular valve. I just want to make sure that we get all of our grit out. We're going to do the same thing here. Yeah, it looks good inside there as well. So the nice thing is, and maybe this is not the correct way to think about it, but in doing this, it kind of gives you a good visual to let you know that you've got good contact all the way around that valve seat onto the bottom of that valve. Oop. Don't want to do that too often. But yeah, everything looks good. I don't see any pitting where I inadvertently dropped it. Of course, these things are pretty darn hard and can take a pretty good beating. Okay. Check our fitment. Looks good. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, with that being said, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I'm going to kind of do the same process on all of these, and then when we get all of our valves done for all of our cylinder heads, I'll bring you back. I'll show you the shim and the spring install on a set, and then we'll call it a video at that point. I'll talk to you in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. A little bit of a glare from the light shining off the shiny aluminum, so hopefully it doesn't bother you too much, but I got you zoomed in. I want to start installing these valves and valve springs because in the previous video you saw, or previous segment of this video I should say, you saw us kind of lapping the valves and getting everything ready. And now these are the valve stem seals. I did go through and dropped a little bit of engine oil onto these onto these seats where these valve stem seals are going to go, just to kind of aid in their getting on. Okay. Now, this is a 1/2 inch deep well socket, which does a good job of sitting on the lip of that seal that you see. So this is a nice alternative, and I'm sure there's an actual tool out there that will drive these seals in place. But on the 6.4, we did the same thing on the 6.4 video, and a lot of other individuals that I watch do the same thing. A socket does just fine. So what I like to do is just go ahead and take it, get it a little bit started by hand, just kind of like that. And then make sure our socket is centered over our seal. I'm just going to tap this in place. I'm going to have to block your view a little bit. And again, I'm not going too terribly hard on it. You can see I'm just using the side of the hammer to get this seal to lock in. But what you should notice is when that seal sits, the tone should change. Hear that? Hear that's a more definitive, kind of a little bit more deep, tinty sound. And that's usually what that usually means, that seal has made contact with the bottom part, this flat area that you see here. So that is this bottom part of this metal valve stem seal hitting the bottom part of that. So when you hear that tone change, and again I'll do the same thing up here to the other valve seal in the same cylinder. Hear that? Sounds kind of tinty. It's not as deep. Let me pick you up here a little bit. Hear that? A very distinct change. Just tap it all around the socket. It's nice and seated. Okay, and that one's done. And that's pretty much going to be the same process all the way down. 8 per cylinder head, 16 total. And with that being done, when I get these rest of these seals in, I'll bring you back and put some valves in. Talk to you in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So as you can see, we've got our valves installed on the cylinder number 8. I just wanted to do that as kind of a test run first to see if everything was looking okay. And I'm going to show you kind of what I did and step through the process on number 7. Now, obviously, we won't go through each one of them because it's just the same repetitive stuff over and over and over again. But if you remember in the previous video, we got everything lapped. So I'm going to reach over, I'm going to grab, this is the passenger cylinder head. So you're looking at number 8 here. So the front would be 2, 4, 6, and 8. So we're going to grab our number 6 intake and exhaust, the ones that we lapped in place earlier. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to, again, just like we did when we lapped them, I'm going to squirt a little oil on the shafts of these valves again. Again, in my opinion, when you're building an engine, for most parts, you can never have enough lube. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One, because it'll help lube the valve stem as well as the guide that it goes in, as well as, since we now have our valve stem seals installed, when you put these valves in, you're going to feel when you hit them. So it's right there. That is the start of the seal. So in order to ease that through, that oil will help you go through it without the valve stem potentially catching it and tearing it. And usually once it makes contact, I like to take the valve and just kind of shift it from side to side, and you'll feel it hit those ribs that those keepers rest in. And then when you're through, you're through. And we're going to do the same thing to our exhaust, again, for that cylinder. Right there is our seal. We're kind of going through it gently now. There we go. Now also what I like to do is, you'll see we got a block of wood here. Now those valve stem seals are usually pretty good since they're new about holding those valves in place. But I'm just going to take a wad of shop towels, put it on a little block of 2x4, and then rotate this cylinder head forward. And that'll help kind of hold everything in place. just going to move another 2x4 block here at the end just to kind of help stabilize the cylinder head. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause you real quick so I can kind of readjust the camera, and I'll bring you right back. Okay, and welcome back. So I got you on the intake for number 6 at this point. Number 6. So if you remember, we're going to use the what you consider an upgraded spring, and inside the kit that came with that upgrade spring, if you remember, spring I should say, they only came with a replacement spring and shim. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse the keepers and the retainers that we took off the 5.7, because once again the instructions didn't say anything about not reusing them, and they didn't give you new ones to use. Again, just changing out the shim underneath. So usually what I like to do on these is just take a little bit of oil and just kind of lube up that spring seat a little bit. So I don't like to install anything dry unless it explicitly calls for it. Remember, this is a 1mm shim, so you're not using the 2s that we took off, because again we're going with this damperless spring, as it's called. So we'll put that on there. Then we're going to take our spring compressor. Installed. And we're going to take our retainer down on top of our spring. I'm going to take our cage, and I'll move the camera here in a second. I'll stop you and move the camera so I can get you a side shot of what we're doing here. Just want to get this cage into position. Go. Okay. Everything's snugged down. And no need to go full torque on this compressor. It just needs to be snug. Okay, so let me pause you. Let me move the camera and give you a side view of what we're doing. Before I do that, just to show you, I'm just using some Lucas Red and Tacky grease on these keepers. I'm just going to pack them full of grease so that way they'll hold themselves onto the valve stem, and you'll see why here in a moment. And yes, I am pulling this out of a grease gun tube manually, mainly because when I went to the hardware store to buy that at the time, with the supply shortages as they were, they just didn't have the tub. It's the same stuff whether you pull it out of a tub or not. But let me get you paused and get you on side view, and I'll bring you back. Okay, so we should have you get up close and personal to a side view. Actually, I need to back you up a little bit because I need to be able to tighten that compressor down. And I'm just going to get these keepers packed full of a little bit of the grease, like I was telling you about before. Just going to load them up. That's going to do a couple things for us. Get that one loaded up as well. It's going to allow us to put one in place. It'll hold itself onto the valve stem. We can push it over to the side and then do the other one. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, now we've got our shim in. We verified that. We've got our spring. We've got our retainer. Now we need to compress our spring so we can put our keepers in. There we go. We're down far enough we can see all the grooves in the stem now. Okay, so on these retainers, you've got a wide side and a narrow side. You can kind of see how they're cut. The narrow side is going to go down inward like this into that retainer. All I'm going to do is get it onto the grooves. Yep, I got to go down a little bit more with the spring compressor. It's not quite low enough. Oh no, wait, it got it. Okay. It did fit. Okay, now that we've got it onto our grooves of our valve stem, I'm just going to push it around to the other side. Then I'm going to grab the other one. And grease is doing a nice job of holding everything in place for us. Get this one pushed in place. There we go. Now we got one on each side. And relieve our tension. And our retainer should engage our keepers. There we go. We can take our compressor off. And that is it in a nutshell. We have another spring installed. So once again, just to recap, we've got our valve in, we've got our new 1mm shim below this, we've got our spring, we've got our retainer, and we've got our keepers. So hopefully that helps kind of show things a little bit and explain things a little bit in case you have to do this job on your own. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause you. I'm going to go ahead and do the same process on all the remaining ones to include the other cylinder head. And then when we get both cylinder heads, I'll bring you back and we'll wrap the video. I'll talk to you in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So you can see we've got our two cylinder heads. We've got our nice shiny new valves installed at this point. I'm gonna flip one of these over just so you can kind of see the result of the other side. You know, not that you didn't see it in the video. It's not all that impressive. You'll have to forgive the camera work. They may be made out of aluminum, but these cylinder heads are still heavy. There you go. You can see that there. You can see our installed springs. And if you're paying attention, you may be wondering what that is. Remember, this is the number 4 cylinder. This is also one of the ones we saw the push rod had popped off of the rocker arm for the intake. So you can see what it was doing there, where occasionally it was slapping up against this spark plug tower and wore a pretty good sized groove in it. Thankfully, it didn't go through it. Still got some meat in there and didn't puncture it, but yeah. But anyway, our springs are in, and from what I can find on the internet, and it kind of seems to be a little bit of a kind of a question on certain years, but what I could find based on this is that this is a 2009 5.7 Hemi. They're saying that the installed spring height, which is from the, let's see if I can show you this here, from the base of the spring up to the bottom of the retainer is supposed to be about 1.99 inches. And I did measure a couple of these when we got the cylinder heads done. Yeah, I should have measured it when I did the first one, but you know what, I was taking the chance. Got them all done, measured a couple on one of these cylinder heads, and per the dial caliper, I'm pleased to say I'm seeing right at 1.99 inches of installed spring height, again measured from the base of the spring to the bottom of the retainer. So I'm happy about that. Let's see here. Let's get this flipped back over. Okay. Straighten this out a bit later. But awesome, and I will take some. I've got my grubby hands all over the surface of this. It may or may not show in the camera, but before we install this back onto the block, I'll obviously take a shop towel and some brake clean and clean this surface up and prep it at the same time that we prep the block itself. But that'll be pretty much it for this video. I've got a little rubbing alcohol. What I'm going to do is just put a little bit into each of the combustion chambers here, combustion area here, once I get some spark plugs installed, and just verify that we don't have any leaks. But I kind of looked through the exhaust and intake ports already, kind of shining a light through it, and didn't see any light peeking through already. So like I said, I think these are nice and sealed, considered we lapped them, but I will run this test either way. And if something comes up leaking, I'll let you know. If you're wondering what the oil is here, is that it was the valve stems that we oiled as we installed everything. And and of course it just it's not I should say leak proof, because the oil will drain down that valve stem as you flip these on their head, and just kind of dribble out the bottom and of course come out the ports. So what I'm saying is that don't be concerned about that, because it's just coming from us lubing up the valve stems as we were installing everything. But awesome. Like I said, that is it. Beautiful. So those recycled 6.4 truck springs that we had are working, along with the 1mm shims. And again, just to show that to you here, that's if you were to buy the spring kit from Chrysler. And like I said, they do give you the 1mm shim, they give you the spring. And just to show that to you again, that's the part number for the kit. And that's the note. Once again, they give you about pulling that 2mm shim out and replacing it with the 1. But in this case, again, we just used the shims and springs that we took off the 6.4 when we did the upgrade. So that's done. I'm going to cut the video at this point, because it's going on long enough and I've rambled long enough. And I'll bring you back for the next piece, which, to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure what it's going to be yet. We may get the cherry picker out and hoist the engine up and pick the engine up, just so we can get the oil pan dropped out and go ahead and get that windage, get that pickup tube inspected, make sure there's no metal, no debris in it, and then get that cleaned out and get the new oil pan gasket and everything installed. That may be the next piece. To be honest with you, I'm not quite sure yet, but I like to save this for the end of the video. If you haven't already subscribed and would like to consider doing so, please do. It's just, like other people have said, and I've heard other YouTubers say this, it doesn't cost you anything. It's just a couple of mouse clicks. There we go. And we're over the 900 sub count at this point, and we're really knocking on that door of trying to get up to 1,000 subs, and kind of just wanting to continue to grow the channel. So if you found this useful and you've made it this far and you haven't subbed already, please consider doing so. It'd be much appreciative. But with that being said, I'll let you go, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Bye.